cafe owner let bikers stay during a storm. 3 months later, 200 motorcycles filled her street. The sun hadn't even thought about coming up yet, but the rumble started anyway. At 5:47 a.m. on a quiet Tuesday morning, the first motorcycle turned onto Maple Street. Then another. Then 10 more. By 6:15, the entire block was filled with them. Harleys, Indians, BMWs, bikes that cost more than most people's cars and bikes held together with hope and duct tape. Men and women in leather vests stood in clusters, drinking coffee from paper cups, leaning against machines that gleamed in the pale pre-dawn light. Neighbors peered through their blinds. A dog started barking. Someone called the police. By the time Officer Danvers arrived at 6:30, there were over 200 motorcycles parked bumper to bumper along both sides of the street. The bikers weren't doing anything wrong. They weren't loud. They weren't fighting. They were just there, standing quietly, waiting outside a tiny cafe called Clara's Kitchen. Danvers walked up to the largest biker he could find, a mountain of a man with a gray beard and a patch that said preacher on his vest. "Sir, can I ask what's going on here?" The big man looked down at him with calm blue eyes. "We're here for breakfast." "Breakfast? That's right. The cafe doesn't open for another 45 minutes. "We know." Danvers looked at the crowd, at the motorcycles, at the quiet determination on every face. "Mind telling me why 200 bikers want breakfast at a place that ain't open yet?" The big man smiled. It was a sad smile, a knowing smile. "Because Clara let us stay when nobody else would. And now Clara needs us to show up. This is Hidden Heroes. We travel this country finding the stories that never make the front page. The quiet moments of grace. The ordinary people who do extraordinary things when nobody's watching. And the way that kindness, real, simple, human kindness, has a way of coming back around when you least expect it. Where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city or town in the comments below. We want to know who's out there with us. Are you in a big city or a small town? Have you ever had a stranger show you kindness when you needed it most? We read every single comment, and your stories are what keep this channel going. Because tonight's story starts with rain. A whole lot of rain. And a woman who could have locked her doors and gone home, but chose something different instead. 3 months earlier, Clara Morrison was having the worst year of her life. The cafe had been her dream for as long as she could remember. When she was a little girl growing up in Tulsa, her grandmother Clara, the one she was named after, had run a small diner out of her house. Just a counter and 4 stools. But the coffee was always hot, and the pie was always free if you were sad. Clara learned everything from that woman. How to make biscuits from scratch. How to listen more than you talk. How a warm meal and a kind word could fix almost anything. When Graham died, Clara used her inheritance, all $12,000 of it, to open Clara's Kitchen on Maple Street. That was 8 years ago. 8 years of 4 a.m. wake-ups and 8 p.m. cleanups. 8 years of knowing every regular by name and exactly how they took their coffee. 8 years of scraping by, month after month, just happy to keep the lights on. Then the bottom dropped out. First, her husband walked out. 18 years of marriage, and he left a note on the kitchen counter. "I need to find myself." Found himself 6 months later in Florida with a woman half his age. The divorce cleaned her out. Then her mother got sick. The good kind of sick, the doctor said at first, treatable. But treatment cost money Clara didn't have, and by the time they caught the recurrence, it was too late. Clara buried her mother on a rainy Tuesday in April, standing alone under a black umbrella while the preacher said words she couldn't hear. And through it all, the cafe kept running. Because what else could she do? The bills didn't stop because her heart was broken. The mortgage didn't care that she couldn't sleep. Every morning at 4 a.m., Clara dragged herself out of bed, drove to the cafe, and started the coffee. Every day, she smiled at customers and asked about their kids and made sure the pie was perfect. But she was tired. Bone tired. Soul tired. By June, she was behind on rent. Behind on supplies. Behind on everything. The landlord had given her 30 days. 30 days to come up with 6 months of back rent, or Clara's Kitchen would become someone else's dream. She didn't tell anyone. Didn't want pity. Didn't want customers coming in with sad eyes and sympathetic tones. She just kept showing up, making coffee, baking pies, and wondering how she was going to say goodbye to the only thing she had left. The storm came on a Thursday night in late July. Clara was supposed to close at 8 p.m. By 7:45, the last customer had paid and left, and she was wiping down the counters, dreaming of a hot shower in her bed. The weather had been threatening all day, that heavy, pressing kind of heat that makes you feel like the whole sky is holding its breath. She'd heard thunder rumbling in the distance for the last hour. At 7:52, the sky opened up. Not rain. This was something else. This was God turning on a fire hose. The kind of rain that hits the ground so hard it bounces back up. The kind that turns streets into rivers in minutes. The kind that makes you pull over and wait because you can't see 2 feet in front of you. Clara stood at her front window, watching it come down, when she saw them. A group of motorcycles, maybe a dozen of them, pulled into her parking lot. The riders were soaked through, their leather vests dark with water, their faces twisted against the onslaught. They parked in a hurry and ran for cover under her awning, huddling together, dripping onto the concrete. Clara checked the clock. 8:02. She was 2 minutes past close. She looked at the bikers, looked at the rain, looked at the clock again. Then she unlocked the door and opened it. "Get in here," she called over the roar of the storm. "Now, all of you." They hesitated for just a second. Bikers aren't used to being invited in, but the rain made the decision for them. They filed through the door, tracking water across her clean floor, dripping from every surface. 12 of them, men and women both. Big people, most of them, with leather and patches and chains and tattoos. Clara locked the door behind them. "Bathrooms in the back if you need towels," she said. "There's a coat rack too. Hang your stuff, it'll dry faster." A big man with a gray beard, the one they called Preacher, stepped forward. "Ma'am, we don't want to impose. We just needed shelter for a minute. We'll get out of your way as soon as it lets up." Clara looked at the window. The rain was coming down so hard she couldn't see the street. "That ain't letting up for a while," she said. "Y'all sit down. I'll make coffee." She didn't wait for an answer. Just walked behind the counter and started the machine. The bikers looked at each other, looked at the water pooling on the floor, looked at this small woman in her apron, making coffee like it was the most natural thing in the world. They sat. The coffee was good, strong and hot, the way coffee should be. Clara brought out a tray of muffins, day-olds she hadn't sold, and set them on the table. "Eat," she said. "They're free. Gonna go stale by morning anyway." Preacher took a muffin, looked at it, looked at her. "You didn't have to do this," he said quietly. "We're strangers. We look how we look." Most places would have locked the door and pretended they didn't see us. Clara sat down at the table with them. Not behind the counter, not standing apart. Right there, in the middle of 12 soaked bikers, like she'd known them her whole life. "My grandmother used to say that the difference between a business and a home is what you do when it's raining," she said. "A business locks the door at closing time. A home leaves the light on." She shrugged. "This place is named after her. I try to remember that." The rain kept coming. An hour passed. Then 2. They talked. Clara learned that Preacher was a retired carpenter from Missouri, that a young woman named Jess was a veteran, served 2 tours, rode to clear her head, that a quiet man called Ghost was an electrician who hadn't spoken in 3 years, not since his wife died. But he nodded along and sometimes almost smiled. They talked about the road, about freedom, about the way a motorcycle makes you feel the world instead of just watching it through a windshield. Clara talked about Graham, about the cafe, about the divorce, and her mother, and the 30-day notice she couldn't afford to tell anyone about. She didn't mean to say that last part. It just slipped out. Maybe because they were strangers. Maybe because it was late and she was tired and the rain made everything feel like a dream. Preacher listened. They all did. And when she finished, nobody said anything for a long moment. Then Preacher reached into his vest and pulled out a worn leather wallet. He counted out 3 20s and laid them on the table. "For the coffee," he said, "and the muffins, and for not locking your door." Clara pushed the money back. "I told you, the muffins were day-olds. Take it." His voice was firm but kind. "Please." She took it. The rain stopped around 11 p.m. The bikers gathered their things, now mostly dry, and headed for the door. Preacher paused on the threshold. "What's your name?" he asked. "Clara. Clara Morrison." He nodded. "Clara, we won't forget this." She smiled. It was just coffee. He looked at her for a long moment. "No," he said. "It wasn't." Then they were gone, the sound of their bikes fading into the wet night. Clara locked up and went home. She didn't think much about it. Just a Thursday night, a storm, and some unexpected guests. She had no idea what was coming. The next few weeks were hard. Harder than before, if that was possible. The 30-day notice became a 20-day notice became a 10-day notice. Clara cut every corner she could. Stopped buying the good coffee, switched to generic. Turned off the neon sign to save on electricity. Ate leftovers instead of real meals. Nothing helped. She was going to lose the cafe. She didn't tell anyone. Didn't want their pity. Didn't want to see the sadness in their eyes when they ordered their usual and knew it might be the last time. On the final Monday, she got a visit from the city inspector. His name was Henderson, and he had the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. He walked through her kitchen with a clipboard, making notes, shaking his head. Your hood system needs upgrading, he said. That's $5,000 minimum. Your floor tiles are cracked. Health code violation. Your hand wash sink is 6 inches too far from the prep area. He kept writing. I'm looking at 15, maybe 20,000 in violations. Clara's heart stopped. I've been here 8 years. Nobody ever said anything about new administration, new standards. He handed her a piece of paper. You have 30 days to comply, or we shut you down. 30 days. The same 30 days she already didn't have. She called her landlord that afternoon. Explained the situation. Asked for an extension, just a little more time. He was sympathetic. He really was. But sympathy didn't pay his mortgage. I'm sorry, Clara. I need you out by the end of the month. She hung up the phone and sat in her empty cafe and cried until there was nothing left. The last Tuesday of the month arrived gray and cold. Clara opened at 6 a.m. like she always did. Made coffee. Baked muffins. Smiled at customers who didn't know they were saying goodbye. At 11 a.m., a motorcycle pulled up outside. Then another. Then 10 more. By noon, the parking lot was full. By 12:30, they were parked along the street. By 1 p.m., there were so many that people were coming out of nearby businesses to stare. Clara stood at her window, watching, not understanding. Then the door opened. Preacher walked in first. Behind him came Jess and Ghost and a dozen others from that rainy night. Behind them came more, faces she didn't recognize, vests from chapters she'd never seen. They kept coming, filling every seat, standing along the walls, spilling out onto the sidewalk. Preacher walked up to the counter. Afternoon, Clara. What is this? He reached into his vest and pulled out an envelope. Thick. Heavy. This is from all of us. Every chapter in 3 states. We passed the hat. He set it on the counter. It ain't charity. It's payment. For what? For letting us stay. For the coffee. For not locking your door. He looked around at the crowded cafe. And for reminding us that there's still good people in this world. Clara's hands were shaking. She opened the envelope. Cash. So much cash. $100 bills, 50s, 20s. Mixed in were checks from addresses she didn't recognize. A money order from a town in Missouri. A cashier's check from a credit union in Arkansas. She counted. Her brain couldn't do the math, but her heart knew. $27,000. Preacher, I can't. You can. You will. He leaned on the counter. That city inspector? He's going to get a visit from about 50 of my brothers tomorrow morning. Nothing threatening. Just a friendly conversation about how small businesses are the backbone of this country and how code enforcement ought to be about safety, not shaking people down. Clara laughed. It came out wet and broken. You did this for me. All of you. Preacher shrugged. We did it for the lady who left the light on. That night, Clara sat alone in her cafe after closing. The cash was in the bank. The violations would be fixed. The landlord had been paid. She looked at the photo of Graham on the wall. The one where she was standing in front of her little diner, apron on, smile wide. You would not believe what happened today, Clara whispered. The photo didn't answer, but the rumble outside did. She walked to the window. The street was still full of motorcycles. The bikers hadn't left. They were sitting on their bikes, leaning against them, talking in small groups. Waiting. Preacher saw her at the window and waved. She opened the door. What are y'all still doing here? Waiting for tomorrow, he said. Figured we'd stick around. Make sure that inspector keeps his word. He paused. Also, we heard you make a mean breakfast. Thought we'd stick around for that too. Clara looked at the crowd. At the street full of motorcycles. At the people who'd become something she never expected. Breakfast, she said. I can do breakfast. She unlocked the door. And for the first time in a long time, Clara's kitchen stayed open all night. In episode 2, the inspector shows up the next morning to find a street full of motorcycles and a cafe full of bikers. What happens next will make your jaw drop. But that's only the beginning. Because the bikers didn't just come for breakfast. They came for a reason. A secret. A connection to Clara's past that even she didn't know about. Why did they really come back? What does Preacher know about Clara's grandmother? And how far will these bikers go to protect the woman who left the light on? The answer will shock you. If you don't want to miss episode 2, subscribe now. Hit that notification bell. Because when episode 2 drops, you're going to want to see it the minute it's live.